you've all shared some great insights from the regenerative agriculture industry and how it's changing the world, especially that of regenerative ranching, restoring our soil, changing the world, and how people are getting ready to embrace it, which is really great to hear. Now, I'd love to move toward a policy-focused discussion about the industry. So, in one word, really fast, I want all of you to say what word would summarize the roadmap for regenerative agriculture going forward. So just one quick word. So let's start with Juan.
Incentivize.
AJ?
Commitment.
David?
Equity.
I think those are all very representative, I would like to think, of their backgrounds. So now I'd like to ask, Juan, what do you see as being the roadmap for growth of small farms across, let's say, Texas and then America as a whole?
Yeah, so I think the roadmap really, I'm obviously coming from the human component. So we have to look at one of the biggest challenges that we have, and I think that AJ brought up White Oak Pastures, and the thing that when I went out there, because we've also been partnering with them and working with them, that Will Harris had a way of bringing people back. And if you go to these rural communities, you have a brain drain. And it's the same thing that, like I brought up Africa, but we had the same issue. All of the youth, all of the intelligent people were leaving. And I talk to ranchers, I talk to farmers every day, and they say, I cannot find, not to say everyone's stupid, but they're like, I cannot find somebody who is worth having on my farm or my ranch unless it's my kid, and I don't pay my kid. I mean, so number one, we have to make sure that these people that are going to be working on the farm, that there is a level of excitement and energy there and upward mobility, right? And that's how you run your ranch is one thing, like how you're going to make it attractive for your kids. This is a huge issue. Oftentimes you'll have like an 80-year-old that's still there running the ranch, and he's got his sons that are 40 or 50, and they're still thinking, when am I going to do this? And it's a huge issue in the industry. But it's the same thing with like these young kids. Like I've found that a lot of the ranchers and farmers that I've worked with, they do not have, we have a human resource problem. How we treat people that come into this industry, we don't excite them, we don't train them, we don't get them, we don't give them the tools to succeed. And so that's something that I think that needs to be addressed. On a policy level, I think that can be through workforce development. I also think that it can be through us being very creative, and that's kind of where we're at, is being creative on how we integrate people into these systems to help them transition to regenerative ag. Because if we give, so in the case of regenerative agriculture, if we give a rancher a veteran, in our case, we give them a veteran and we say, this is someone who's trained, who's going to help you access better markets, like AJ's bringing up, better premiums, access natural credits, so carbon credits, water credits, veteran credits because you're working with veterans or Native Americans as well, and then wildlife credits. You're working with conservation because that person is not just an employee now, they are an asset. They're somebody that is bringing value and you cannot deny it. If we treat them like that, then all of a sudden you're going to find that they're not just like, hey, wake up in the morning, get out there and go sweat it out and come back and hopefully there's some dinner on the table or something. I think that they'll actually be treated like a partner. That's how that's how I kind of envision it. I think I went off the rails there and I lost it.
No, it's all good. We like to talk more about opportunity and people being able to come into this as we talked about how we need more farmers, we need more ranchers. Theodore Roosevelt quit his very cushy life in New York for the purpose of he wanted to live the strenuous life on a ranch. And if he can do it, I think there's so many other people in this country who can as well. And I mean, but it can't be done without support, of course, support from so many industries. I mean, AJ, you've made it clear consumers are the path forward for bringing smaller farms back to America. And there's such a disconnect between consumers and where their food comes from. I was reading that it's at the highest rate it's ever been, a disconnection of individuals from their food sources. And with that being the case, I mean, what kind of policy or intervention can be done to better connect Americans with their food source, especially those who probably can't be out on a ranch? I mean, we still need our cities, we still need our accountants and our blue collar workers, or sorry, our white collar workers. How do we connect them to their food sources?
Yeah, it's storytelling and marketing. I mean, that's really what that comes down to, right? There's many examples of organizations or companies that hit the right tone and the right message that just really blew them up because they engaged the consumer enough to bring them in. And so, some of the work that we've been doing in policy, like specifically around Product of USA, if it's not very clear on the label because it's mandatory, and so they move forward with Product of USA because it was easier, it was, the Secretary of Agriculture has control over that. Congress has to vote MCOOL. Okay, that's great, but if nobody knows about it, if you didn't do the work to educate the consumer that they should even look for that label, then it's not going to make a difference. And so storytelling and getting people re-engaged with the people growing their food, and then also helping the consumer understand the significance and the importance for themselves for being connected to their food, I think is the way we move forward. But without that, we have so much, there's so much attack on our attention from everybody, right? Social media has been great to get messages out there, but if the algorithm doesn't feel like you need to see it, you'll never know about it. They did a study, I read this study during COVID. They were asking kids in New York about where their food comes from. And they absolutely believed the grocery store made it. So they were wondering why there was a shortage.
Kind of a brown cow chocolate milk situation.
Yeah, exactly. Brown cow chocolate milk. Yeah. So they were like, why don't they just make more? Why are they limiting us? They just had no clue because of the environment they grew up in of what it took to put that product in their grocery store.
There's a rancher here in Texas, in Lufkin, I think. His site is Salt and Fire. And to AJ's point, they are great at marketing. He now has 10 times the demand of what he can meet.
That's Joel?
Hobbs?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's a small world in the agriculture business. I think it's great to know the marketing and the storytelling, because I think that's so much of what's happening here at EarthX too, in the other rooms, is people telling their stories, and everything ranging from wildlife preservation to regenerative agriculture in this room. So of course storytelling plays such a big role, and policy is nothing more than storytelling with legalese, right? So yeah. With that being said, I mean, of course, the other intersection with legality is finance. And I mean, David, with your finance background, you've talked about leveraging, you've talked about equity, but what are the next steps? Let's say if someone in this room says, I want to become a regenerative rancher, I want to become a regenerative farmer, what are the most important steps for them to come online with that finance connection?
In the startup world, it usually starts with 3 F's. You go to your friends and your family and fools, and that's one way to start. In terms of the government, AJ and Juan will be a lot better about talking about the sources there. Back in December, the USDA announced a $700 million allocation specifically for regenerative ranching. So they are trying to get that money out there. I told you we're in High Ground as an early stage company. There are companies that are farther along than we are that have been doing this for quite a while that are providing equity to fund those ranchers. But what I would really want to emphasize to a crowd like this is, what about coming from the other end? There are a lot of family offices that want to deploy capital into legacy assets. They may want to own land for multiple generations, and they want downside risk protection. This is one way of doing it, where you're creating more resilient land. Well, they can come in and bring equity into a situation like this and fund a rancher for decades. The other thing I want to mention about capital is, if there's anybody in philanthropy here, think about what we're doing. If we're sequestering carbon with this, how about we work with a nonprofit that wants to fix the environment? You've become wealthy and created a $100 million foundation. You have to give away 5% each year of the corpus. And so you're giving $5 million away, hoping these nonprofits are fixing the problem. I'll come to you and say, loan me $5 million at 0% for 10 years, and it'll be forgivable based on the carbon sequestration. So we'll do a baseline day one. After 5 years, we'll do it again. If we've hit the bogey, forgive half the note. Do it again after another 5 years. If we do it again, forgive the rest of the note. So now you, the philanthropist, are not paying for something that you're not getting. And think about the leverage and the resilience, the leverage that that the rancher is getting off of that 0% forgivable note.
That's really great. And I mean, bringing up the carbon sequestration, bringing up how climate is so connected with agriculture. I mean, we haven't mentioned it much this morning because there's so many other facets of it, but the carbon sequestration and how this can really help the environment we're around. Juan brought it up of fighting forest fires and all of that. But there's so much that those non-traditional forms of finance can do to support regenerative ag. I mean, Juan, you were just fighting a bill in Utah that would have taxed carbon credits in a way that was going to very much hurt ranchers in Utah. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that challenge got surmounted?
Yeah, so I mean, we deal with a lot of, and it goes back to misinformation, but when we were talking about using, and we're calling it natural credits because we're stacking different credits, because the second that you talk about carbon credits to ranchers, there's you're collecting our data, and literally with the representative we were working with and trying to help get on our side, help them understand that this is an opportunity for landowners to decide, like, do I want to add more value? Do I want to improve the value of my land and also bring in revenue? And he felt like it was un-American because there was, potential interests outside of the country that could collect that data and everything else. And when we're trying to bridge some of these gaps, I think that one thing that's really important is going back to it is bringing them out and helping them understand that we're on the same side. Like, we want to increase the herd, as AJ pointed out, like that's a national security issue. And the only way, and this is what I try and tell people, and that's why I said incentivize is my word. If we do not incentivize ranchers, you cannot demonize them for continuing to stress the land, to degrade the land. They have no water. Quite literally this year in Utah, we do not have water. There was anyone that was into skiing, you did not ski this year. And the same thing in Colorado was the same thing. And so, and if we want to talk about the Ogallala Reservoir, that is gone almost, we're depleting that completely. And so we're at a point right now, and to talk a little bit about what David hit on, there is a lot of excitement here. Partly because of the stresses. We have a centralized food system that has finally hit its breaking point, and you're going to watch it break. But then the exciting thing for us is that when it starts to come back together, you're going to find that food sovereignty is at the front. That you're going to find food processing, you're going to find meat processing around communities, and where you find that, you're going to find regenerative agriculture just automatically starts happening. And I think that, if we're going to force it and we're going to have the government help with it, fine. But we have to incentivize the ranchers and farmers some way. In our view, with this bill that we had to kill, we had to tell the government to stop being greedy and stop trying to take money from ranchers. And we just said, look, this is money that's going to incentivize them to work with veterans. It's going to be money that incentivizes them to go regenerative and to put water back in the soil that will eventually go back to the Great Salt Lake. Everyone wants to just pump water into the Salt Lake and steal it from the other lakes, which is the solution. Or they want to shoot stuff into the sky and force it to rain. Those are the two solutions that keep coming up. And what we're talking about is a longer-term solution that let's go upstream. Let's work with the people that care about this land more than anyone else because it's been there for 5 or 6 generations and they don't want to lose it. So anyway, I think that was the reason why we wanted to kill the bill. It was basically just saying, hey, you have a right to your land, But I think that to his point, there's obviously a desire that they want to ensure that ranchers are taken care of as well. But we just have to come to a common ground and address some of those policies head on.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something that I want to take the conversation into a little bit of new territory, but you mentioned that the existing system is somewhat at a breaking point. And I'm sure for a lot of people, they think, really, is it? Is it? And because they're not a part of the food production, or even if they are, they're doing okay.
Ask
So
AJ, he knows.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask AJ, what are ways that we can say and show that our current system is under strenuous force? It's struggling, and it needs to be adapted and changed so that we can all have a better, more resilient food system. What are some of the symptoms we're facing?
Yeah, they are many. So in my journey, when I had the vision for this from the farm, that was in 2020, and I spent 3.5 years doing R&D before we started building the software. And during that time, I ended up running a USDA slaughterhouse in Cody, Wyoming, which is why I live there now. Small, 35 head a week, not, what your local small town processors used to look like. And I had no idea I was going to end up there, and so it was quite a surprise to myself. But it was a very important experience to see that side of our processing, the processing and what's happening. And what's happening for us, you can see around the nation. So we were selling beef direct to consumer in 2019 for my cousin's ranch. And in March of 2020, we called to get our next round of processing to schedule our cattle. And prior to this phone call, 2 weeks prior, we'd call and say, hey, we need a spot. And they're like, great, how many? Hey, we have 5 cattle to bring in. Okay, great, we'll see you in 2 weeks. No kidding, with less than a month, the next time we called, and they said, we'll see you in 1.5 years. So when COVID hit, because we have 30 to 40 slaughterhouses processing 6,000 head a day, and then they closed because of the concern of COVID, that supply chain stops. But our entire supply chain is built on just in time. So if they're killing 6,000 head today, that means they have 6,000 tomorrow, 6,000 next day, and so on. But when that's not happening, it's very expensive to keep animals alive and feed them when there's nowhere for them to go. And so anybody that had cattle that were ready, they flooded our small processors. So those that relied on those in our own communities, we couldn't access it. They were full. So 1.5 years was wait. And in some areas, even today, you're 6 to 9 months out waiting for your processing if you need it. And that's just on the processing side. Then you got fuel costs and trucking it, right? You got your feed costs, and you got the drought where you're not going to be able to raise the feed to be able to finish them on grass, or even get them halfway there so they can go to a feed lot if that's where their end cycle is for this particular supply chain. I mean, the whole thing is falling apart. And as Juan's example of what he saw in Africa, if people knew how close to a catastrophe we are in our nation, they would prioritize their budget for local food. They wouldn't be buying those expensive fancy drinks that are coming out to promise health, right? They wouldn't be buying protein powder. They'd be buying beef because beef has protein in it, and that's better for you anyway. It's got all the other essential and non-essential amino acids and phytonutrients and omega-3 to 6 ratios that you need in one thing that you're eating. So if consumers knew, they would be prioritizing that budget. They'd cancel a few of their streaming services to buy higher quality food, right? We just don't know, and we're going to pay if we don't have enough people moving in this direction. We're going to pay for it. There's hope, but how much we're going to have to pay is still yet to be seen.
Yeah. First off, I'd trade my HBO Max for some good fresh food. I would. But there's some other aspects of it too that are so important. I mean, the average farmer in 2025 made negative $500. Now, I think any of us can make negative $500 with a lot less work than running a farm. And the USDA was responsible for about 13.5% of all farm income in the United States through subsidies, through grants, things like that. That's a lot to have an entire system based off only whatever the government's going to pay out during that supply chain and raising all of that. And that's a hard thing to force a farmer to feed an entire country based off of negative $500 and 13.5% of all income coming from the government. That's a hard thing to do. So I got to ask, with that being the case, what can be done to help farmers experiencing that experience more financial independence? I'd love to ask all of you that, if that's all right. So let's start with David.
Sure. It's like any business. Again, the reason we keep pushing for regenerative is it's a great business. You can make good money off of it, and the way to be successful in business is to grow it. So you need to make it to grow it more. We also need to, like AJ said, the visibility. We need to get more visibility out there because the dollars are out there. They're trying to go to work, whether it's through philanthropy, investment, or consumer spending. They're out there. They just don't know. On the investment side, they don't know what to do. I'm hearing a lot of family offices that are wanting to get involved but don't know exactly how to go about it. I may be getting off track a little bit, but I want to mention that back in November, the USDA and the DoD jointly announced the National Farm Security Action Plan, stating that we are too dependent on foreign countries for our own food, and our agricultural lands are a matter of national defense. And so they're promoting things to support that. So if the USDA and the DoD are working together on this, you can just imagine what the concern that they have about this.
For me, I'd say that we need policies that prioritize the small farms as much as the big farms. Right now, there's a big focus on institutional reform, which is great. You know, SNAP reform, so that it's better foods, whole foods that are going into our schools and our hospitals and all of these other places. That's all necessary because many of the ranchers that are left raising in volume, they're never going to be able to sell the amount of livestock or produce or whatever, if they're medium to larger scale, direct to consumer. There's too much to move. So that's a good place for them. But as I said, when 86% of what we have left are small, they can't survive on wholesale dollars. They need the full retail. And so we need policies that allow for interstate commerce to free up the bottlenecks of what we are left with. For example, you've got 3 categories of processors. You've got custom, which means you can only eat what you send to them yourself. So if I own the cow, I can have them process it, but I have to eat it, or I can give it away, but I can't sell it. Then you have state inspected. State inspected facilities follow all of the same rules and more than what the USDA requires for a USDA inspected plant. But you can't buy from that state inspected plant if you're in the neighboring state. But if you drove across state lines and picked it up yourself, you could buy it. So we need to change some of these policies so as a consenting adult, if you want to buy from another state and have it shipped to you, then let's make that happen. I know there's some work being done on that to see if they can make those changes. And then the third one is a USDA inspected facility. That's the one we operated, which allows us to send nationwide. But the cost and the burden of the overregulation that happens in a small facility, we have one inspector in a small plant that is watching every single one of the cows that we're processing. Comparatively, in the facilities that are running 6,000 head through there, they're not nearly getting the same level of scrutiny that we are. And then it's also the luck of the draw of the USDA employee that you get. I've had USDA employees that were my allies. They were partners. We worked closely together. We had competitions. I'm going to see it before you see it. And then I've had other inspectors, it didn't matter what we did, whatever their personal decision beliefs were, you could tell that they affected our business, and they would shut us down for things that had no business shutting us down, and it cost money. And so there's a lot of these issues that are being looked at, fortunately, but do need to be changed as soon as possible.
I think going off that point, I think the technology can be a huge catalyst. This should be AI. Like there should be some solutions there. I know there are because I've worked with companies that are dealing with all that traceability and making sure that everything's standardized and across, whether it's small scale or large scale. In my opinion, I think that if we're going to support with policies, I think that where we need to be looking at is land. I think we need to be opening it up, and I also think that I'm a huge proponent of from the farm. I think that if we cannot get these people a market, they will not survive. and it's too much work. I know this from my own experience, having run a farm management company and doing all the marketing myself, getting on social media. I know what AJ's doing, and I would never be in his. I'm not going to trade spaces ever with him.
I think that's a compliment.
It is.
Fair.
It is. But the storytelling, this is such an important part. And AJ was telling me, he's like, look, you got to do more of these. And I'm like, this is not my favorite part of what we do. But if we do not tell the story, then this is not going to end well. There is a lot of pressure and there's a lot of stress on our on the ag sector right now. The aging population of farmers and ranchers it's insane when you think of there's a 60-year-old and there's a 60-year-old rancher. Who do you think is healthier? Like, I mean, just because they're a rancher doesn't mean that they've taken care of themselves. I mean, yeah, they've gotten more outdoor time, but they probably have skin cancer and they probably were eating nasty, food from off of.
Are you saying that Mountain Dew to keep the ranchers
Mountain
moving
Dew to
is
keep
not...
things moving? Yeah. So like these are not like you're gonna find that there's people that are just they're ready to croak, and that's where we're at right now. That's just on the personnel side. But one thing that I do think if we want to invest in this industry is that we have to get very creative on the private side. I don't want to rely on the government. But I will say that if the government's already funding, clearing of areas to prevent wildfires, send in cows. But don't make the ranchers pay for it. In fact, pay the ranchers for it. Just the difference here is the way that we look at things. And that's what I try and approach this with the government. It's the way that I approach it with ranchers and farmers. Is because on the side, what I do with consulting is I help ranchers and farmers see like, hey, you're already doing this for the government. You just need to have a conversation with them and get it written into a grant. And all of a sudden, instead of you having to pay for a lease, they're paying you for clearing land. It may be a little bit more intentional, which is what we want. If I look at kind of a synonym to regenerative, I think that it is intentional. That's all we're saying, that you're just intentional about how you're grazing. And when I was running my farm management company, when I switched, I started following Alan Savory's book. I read through it, and I was just obsessed with it. It was the holistic management book that he came out with, and it changed everything for me because I stopped looking at like all the shiny things and buying new tractors, and I started looking and saying, what is actually going to bring income to me? And this is a decision that, I mean, this would change every small farm that I can think of. I've gone into their books and I've gone in and looked at their accounting, and I've realized, like, what did you buy all this stuff for? And it's because that's what they thought farming was about. It's like, I got into this to get a big green tractor that's $500,000, and they do it. It's crazy. And the government kind of incentivizes them to do it with tax write-offs and stuff. So I think that if we look at it and we're pragmatic, there's money that you can make up front, even with natural credits. That's one. But I mean, AJ was just talking to me. His friend is looking into regenerative insurance opportunities that can bring money up front as well. And if we can start stacking some of these things, instead of us looking at just the beef as the product, maybe the product is the land itself that we're recovering, and maybe you don't even have to own it. I'm just throwing things out there, but like, I think that Gen Z, the exciting thing, if I was Gen Z right now, I'd be looking at this and saying, I'm gonna just flip everything upside down. I don't need to own this to feel connected to it, and I don't need to own it to make $1 million. In fact, owning it might just be the worst idea ever, because where do you get the money to own it? So I think that management is the future with regenerative, and I think that management people should be making much more than accountants, much more than some of the guys over at Silicon Valley. I think that that's what the future is going to look like, especially as we bring in some of this technology with collars and everything else. Like, you're going to find that management is so precise that we can solve some of these problems that the government was paying hundreds of millions of dollars to solve. like the wildfires that ripped through Utah and California just last year.
Absolutely.
Can I add something to that? So
Sure.
specifically public land grazing, so you guys are informed and know, 1935 they implemented what's called the Taylor Grazing Act. These are for western states, public land states, where the majority of the ground in these states are public ground. So in 1935, we used to have 18 million AUMs. AUMs means animal units a month. So one mama cow, one baby cow equals one AUM. So we used to have 18 million. We had about 2 million acres of wildfires we averaged. That crossed around 2020, the trends. We're down to 8 million AUMs. So there's our cattle numbers. And many of the calves come from, or should be coming from, the west. Now we're down to 8 million AUMs and 10 million acres of wildfires a year. Along with that, we stopped responsible logging. And so now you've got these forests that are tinderboxes. I live right outside of Yellowstone. It's the most unhealthy forest I've ever seen. It's so thick. I used to fight wildfires when I was a young man, so I understand that side of it as well. We look at this thing and it's just waiting to explode. So we need to get livestock back on the land. And fortunately, 3 weeks ago I was in Washington when Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of the Department of Interior, Rollins and Burgum, signed a historical memorandum of understanding to return suspended and vacated AUMs back to ranchers in the West so we can rebuild our domestic herd. Without access to our public lands, we're never going to do that. We have to get that back open, and it's being put into place right now, which I'm really excited about. So like Juan said, Gen Z, there's opportunities coming. You just got to be aware of them and be willing to adapt, and that'll be a huge outcome for all of us.
Absolutely, and I know plenty of people that I still went to school with when I was younger that they would tell me all the time during their college classes, I'd love to be a cowboy. I'd love to be doing that, and the opportunity is there. People want to do it, and I'm so glad you brought up public lands, because public lands access doesn't just mean being able to hike in Yellowstone, doesn't mean just being able to fish on public lands. It's grazing, it's opportunity. There's so much that runs into it, and we got to make sure we still have access to that for American producers and American citizens. So I want to end with one more question for everybody. Again, one word. What do you think the future of regenerative agriculture is after this discussion? Your one word. David.
Necessary.
Possible.
Veterans.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And please, I'm so excited for the rest of the program.